Thank you very much, Nat. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Thank you very much, Q-Sport, for the opportunity to talk with you. I guess it's my pleasure to take you through an early share of what we're working on in relation to the Pathways Blueprint. And I'm assuming, magic. So under Activate Queensland, which Nat just talked about, we're in the process of delivering under our second action plan, which is called Accelerate. And Accelerate commits to enhancing pathways for Queensland athletes, coaches and officials by developing a Pathways Blueprint to strengthen talent development and lifelong participation opportunities for Queenslanders. The Pathways Blueprint is intended to guide cooperation between all relevant entities within the physical activity system and drive development and implementation of specific initiatives both within and beyond government that will support the achievement of the intended outcomes. And to develop the Pathway Blueprint, Sport and Recreation undertook an open procurement process and engaged sport consultants Gemba to deliver a report on the current pathway system in Queensland, utilising both a literature review and a system-wide consultation. So this has ensured that the key findings and recommendations of the report are holistic and anchored in data-driven analysis, that's hard, and the lived experience of Queenslanders. And so I'll be sharing sort of the key points, the key points of that with you today. And I guess after Lucy's presentation, there's actually quite a lot of themes that that will be repeating, I think. So I guess that's kind of useful and helpful to know that we're on the right direction. So to enable co-design of the blueprint and to ensure connection with industry, Sport and Rec also established a reference group to provide strategic guidance through the consultation, development and implementation phases. So the membership of the reference group is targeted to organisations, individuals with experience, interest and representation within the Queensland Pathways landscape. The reference group is not a decision-making body, but provides direction and expert advice, and we thank them for the advice that they've provided so far, but also for encouraging their networks to become involved in the consultation process, which meant that we had a really good cross-section of voices and opinions. So while the meetings have been held through the report development phase, this group will be integral moving forward when we go through into the implementation of the blueprint and the suite of initiatives that will support it. So the literature review was undertaken as the first step to guide the consultation sessions and to clarify the strengths and gaps in the current research and frameworks. And the intent was to understand best practice and the common challenges in the sporting pathway landscape. The key focus areas in the literature review are detailed here, and include everything from junior participation to supporting enablers. There are several existing frameworks that have been reviewed, including the FTEM framework, Long-Term Athlete Development Framework, American Development Model, the FIT model, and the Sport Participation Pathway model. So this slide sort of demonstrates both the strengths and commonalities between all of those pieces of work and also some of the gaps that we think might be in the existing frameworks. So to touch on a few, limiting early stage competition. So most pathways discourage a strong focus on competition during the early stages of development. Competition too soon can lead to discouragement and have adverse effects on mental and physical health. Development stages beyond age group. So some frameworks have recently moved away from a solely age-based lens to acknowledge that individuals develop at different paces. And pathways are now defining development stages through a combination of skill development, age and physical characteristics. And identification of talent. There's a strong focus on identifying talent through post-foundational stages and nurturing it to high performance stages. There's clear pathways and structures in place for identified talent to progress through most pathways. The review also highlighted several gaps or weaknesses in current frameworks, best summarised by the tongue twister, high performance hyperfocus. So less than 2% of participants reach success at an elite level, yet there's significant focus on development of elite talent. This focus can ignore the other benefits and outcomes from participation in sport and recreation activities. I guess the challenge is, should we consider this focus and how we can translate that focus for the other 98% of participants, given the majority of Queenslanders, even talented athletes, are participating for many reasons other than to become an elite athlete. Poor retention strategies is also probably something that's a bit of a gap in the current frameworks. So despite the impetus on introducing children to sport, there are frameworks that don't have plans in place for participants who no longer want to compete competitively or have an injury or fall out of the system. 20% of participants in Australia drop out of sport-related activities between the ages of 15 and 18, which is that peak time for talent development. Limited inclusive considerations, so sport and pathways exist to serve all citizens and participants, irrespective of gender, cultural background, social economic status, physical or intellectual disability. And some cohorts are traditionally underrepresented in the sporting participation and also in the frameworks, meaning that there is less talent development and adverse health and wellbeing outcomes. So a really easy one to point to is in Australia, girls are 10% less likely to participate in sport than boys. And I guess the other main weakness that we see is that the frameworks are linear in structure. Everyone's seen the pyramid, for instance. A large proportion of current pathways are linear and don't represent participants able to move freely either between different sports or roles within a sport. So on to consultation. There were some various methods of consultation. There were 3 face-to-face forums in Rockhampton, Townsville and Cairns, and 3 online forums for targeting Toowoomba, South Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast and Brisbane, which sort of translates into 96 attendees from councils, clubs, associations, schools and parents. And discussions across each of those were really meaningful, lots of insights shared, which were unique to each location. There was also individual interviews with 15 targeted state and national level organisations, which we'll go through a bit in detail. And there was also public consultation through a survey. The survey was promoted through social media posts, reference group networks and state level organisation networks. So through all your hard work, I guess Gemba predicted that we definitely would not reach a cap of 500, which they put on our survey. And we had 608 respondents, so well done, support. So I guess the next 3 slides are a bit of a deep dive into what you told us. In order to gain an understanding across the industry, both small and large state level organisations were included, and also targeted were sports that have multiple disciplines within their sport and those that cater to athletes with a disability. So thank you very much for those who participated in this process. Some of the challenges that were really amplified through these conversations were the existing frameworks are linear and not reflective of the true athlete pathway, and a need to reflect the dynamic nature of actual pathways and the multiple avenues and routes individuals can take. There's, I guess, nationally implemented pathways don't account for Queensland-based nuances, and a common one-size-fits-all approach are hard to tailor for individual sports. It was also noted that most sports must follow their national sporting organisation's pathway structure, but there were some places where improvements could be made. And in some sports, once an athlete had been identified, they transferred over to the national organisation or the academy, and the state level organisation had limited involvement or access to developing and nurturing that athlete. Geography was also highlighted as a significant barrier to overcoming talent development due to insufficient competition levels and a lack of highly experienced officials and coaches for some activities in some areas. Some organisations also mention an aversion from specific clubs to grow. This is actually really interesting. We didn't know this before this piece. But some clubs have a focus on their high performance team, which means that they want to deprioritise broader participation. Another thing that was sort of not known was that some organisations have not got the facilities to cope with a broad participation base. So with all of those challenges, there's also opportunities. State level organisations articulated key opportunities moving forward could include the creation of a network within sport to drive collaboration and identifying pathways across sports to enable talent and participation transfer, creating a regional focus to allow for development of coaches and targeted program delivery, Facilitating alignment between schools and clubs to assist with participation information, such as head injury assessment information. That one's for you, Juanita. Also, facilitating alignment between sports to share best practice information. And ensuring structures are put in place to retain participants within the sporting ecosystem, so there's not an overemphasis on bringing in new talent, and outlining the roles and benefits of volunteering across grassroots sports to help drive new volunteers in the ecosystem. So where all of that sort of came into the report, key implications, I guess some of the things that directly comes out of that is improving access to facilities, especially in regional Queensland, to help grow participation and pathways. Ensuring alignment between school and club pathway systems to improve participant experience and talent development. Providing more talent development opportunities in regional areas to reduce financial and travel burden. Outlining the expectations and highlighting the importance of key roles such as coaches, officials and volunteers to consider how to reduce the workload burden within those roles. Outlining the pathway available to coaches and other non-playing roles will be important to ensure lifelong involvement. And sharing participation data to allow sporting bodies to better understand the needs and requirements of their participants. So over to the community consultation. So there was the same sort of process was undertaken. Regional areas identified different areas of concern to South East Queensland, so I'll just go through those just a little bit. The regional focus was by far about too much travel. The requirement to access high level competitions and specialised training was really difficult. And athletes were more likely to participate in high intensity training camps rather than consistent regular training sessions. And without local high-level competitions, athletes located in regional areas don't get the regular access to development, and this in turn reduces their opportunity to be identified. Access to enablers such as sports psychologists, nutritionists and strength and conditioning coaches were also, I guess, something that was flagged through the regions. A common issue across the state was the ageing supporter network, with organisations struggling to bring through the next generation of volunteers to replace the current cohort, which I definitely don't think I'm telling anyone in this room something they don't know. More is being expected from volunteers, which makes it a much less appealing opportunity, and this has a knock-on effect with a limited pipeline for new coaches and officials. And the Brisbane Forum specifically talked about a lack of collaboration and connection between the school and sports systems, leading to injuries and burnout of junior participants. But it's not all doom and gloom. So there does continue to be a strong participation numbers across the state, particularly in the junior environment. I guess my personal observation of observing the workshops is that the people who came and participated had great passion and great pride in the work that they do, especially how it supports young people. And the range of sporting options across the state has grown, with more activities available to Queenslanders across different demographics and regions. Volunteer goodwill across the landscape is still there, with people spending a lot of their own time supporting grassroots organisations. However, it's noted that volunteerism is a key priority area to be considered for greater support. Inter-school collaboration and knowledge transfer, inter-sport collaboration and knowledge transfer was relatively strong in regional cities where there's a strong community bond, and there's a growing recognition of the role that schools play in foundational skills, taking into account the before-mentioned disconnect between school and club pathways. The other identified strengths were distinctly South East Queensland focus, which was about the quality of competitions across South East Queensland being very strong, allowing talent to compete at a high level and develop to their full potential. And due to the number of professional teams in South East Queensland, the facility and infrastructure is generally very strong and allows athletes the chance to develop their potential with greater ease. Similarly, it was noted that exposure to elite level competitions such as the NRL Cowboys in Townsville was a key driver of participation there. So as I've already stated, we had a whopping 605 responses from across Queensland. There was a spread from across the state, with responders accompanying various roles within the sporting community, from parents to off-field administrators, and I'll go through some of the key highlights in the next slide. So nothing here will be astounding to any of you. I guess the most significant barrier detailed by parents is largely time and costs. What probably is important is 62% of parents said that if costs were to increase further, it would restrict their child from participating, which is a big number. And regional Queenslanders are experiencing significant cost to attend high-level competitions, and it's becoming a barrier to sport and talent development. In fact, Gemba went as far as to state that if you're a child residing outside of southeast Queensland, you're at an immediate disadvantage of achieving the highest level of the majority of sports. Not all, but the majority. So clearly this is something that's very concerning, and I guess something that we will be trying to look at through the blueprint. So now to the crunchy bit, what all that information sort of means and how sort of where we're kind of getting to. So let me just first be clear to say that we understand and appreciate that each sport has their own pathway, typically set at a national level, but our goal is to understand how together we can improve participation opportunities across the state, both for those who simply want to be active with their entire life, but also those who have the talent and desire to achieve at the highest levels, and so that they're provided an opportunity to do so with the appropriate support systems in place, whether they live in Brisbane or Mount Isa. And so that's what we're hoping to achieve through this exercise and the identification of key initiatives that will support it. So using all of that information, Gemba sort of came up with 4 key theme areas and 20 problems to solve as an industry. So I won't go through all 20, but so under equity and opportunity, cost of participation, equal access to quality infrastructure, lack of inclusive pathways, those type of things became apparent. The participant talent and skills development is about retention of coaches and officials, the tension that exists between participation and talent development outcomes, significant workload and pressure on the young participants, and competition between sports for athletes. Lifelong participation, I guess there's an acknowledgement that there's multiple entry and exit points for physical activity with a need to provide direction through all stages of a participant's life. There's lack of clear linkages to alternate pathways, including recreation. That's a very loose definition of recreation because of the people we're talking to, that also includes social sport. A poorly defined transition route into non-athlete involvement, including a lack of clear pathway for non-athlete roles. And limited talent pathways for adults as opposed to juniors taking up a sport. And the coordination and collaboration, I guess poor clarity of roles and responsibilities, volunteer and administration burnout, lack of collaboration and some fragmentation. So Gemba's just recently submitted their final report to the department with those recommendations and the key problems to solve. I guess while the information provided in that report is a great starting point, we all need to work collaboratively together over the coming months to create and explore improved opportunities for the Queensland pathway system. We don't want to reinvent the wheel, but we do want to provide something that is practical and able to be used by sport and recreation industry to complement what is already existing and to also guide future investment. So I hope that you're all willing to join us on that journey to create improved opportunities for Queenslanders, including participants, coaches, officials and other volunteers. Thank you.
Delivering what I think is a very important piece of work, like game changer, and underpins a lot of what Kieran was talking about of how we again continue to lead by example for the rest of the nation. So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Lots of work in there, of course. So does it get for you overwhelming, thinking about what we might have to do in that space as a group?
No, it's exciting. It's really exciting. Like, you've got to uncover all these problems and put them all together to be able to sort of think about what are the opportunities. And Jess is smiling over there, but we've got an amazing team that is here to support the industry. So I think it's an exciting place to be.
Great. I really like the one about sport during life cycles and stages. I played every sport at school. I then went to obsessive, high performance, hyper focus in beach volleyball, and now I'm obsessively focused on golf, Nicole, and yoga, and it's great. So, questions from the audience of Tiani and the work that they've been doing in the department.
Hey Tiani, there's been a lot of talk about volunteerism, recruiting volunteers, but there's also a lot of talk about skill shortages just in the business world. So is there some crossover from what Desbit's doing and other organisations and what we can, I guess, adopt into sport and how we can look at solving that problem?
Absolutely. As you would already know, capability and building capability is one of the big focuses of the department and working collaboratively with the industry. I guess we're looking at the work that DESBIT does, lots of emerging work in relation to micro-credentials and a lot of those type of things. So I guess there's a lot of opportunity there to hone how we deliver and support volunteers and workforce.
Tiani, I'm really excited about the work that is coming because it comes back to my question that I asked Kieran at the start of the day, because I think that's the other part that is often missed by the rest of Australia and Queensland is the diversity in terms of geographics. And the comment that you made around the intensive camps as being a solution, but are they actually supporting the athlete in the best way? Because the daily training environment for these athletes is not at the same level as what it is in Southeast. So has there been, and I know there's still a lot, we're not necessarily in solution mode yet, but I know there's been a lot of chatter through the hockey community, for example, around the regional QAS hubs that were once a thing. But when we're thinking about the 2032 athletes, that's probably not necessarily a QAS position yet because they're still coming through the pathway. So is there consideration from the department around how sports can work more collaboratively in the regions? Because we all have the same problem of trying to provide great training environments for the small talent of kids that are there.
It's an excellent observation, and I think genuinely one of the hardest challenges for Queensland with how big we are. I think the short answer is yes. That's definitely one of the things we're thinking about. Maybe alternate delivery models, definitely leaning into innovation. During COVID, there were elite performers who were in a different state to their coach and were still able to train in that way. So how do we translate that down the pipeline? I think all of those sort of things are up in the mix. But I guess in relation to that and in relation to solutions, we're definitely looking to you guys for solutions as well. So if there are things that really work or there's something that really irritates you about something that's happening, please talk to us about that, because we want to make sure that this is really holistic and kind of can set a good direction, and it's not something we're going to be able to solve in like 5 minutes, but it's something that potentially we can all sort of lean in a bit and get a really good outcome for all sports.
And you spoke of the 2% and the 98%. I mean, there's a hockey roo, hasn't played at the Olympics yet, but has played in the Commonwealth Games. From Mackay, has had to move to Brisbane, part of the QAS, now has to move to Perth, part of the national program. So ultimately there is that pathway that has to be followed at some point. But how do we provide that opportunity through the digital age to have a coach? I had a strength and conditioning coach in Canberra while I was training in the gym here, for example. So I would be more scared of that, because if I didn't hit submit what I'd been doing, the phone would ring. So yes, very, very important. Last question before we got two. Was there another one over there? We got two, one over here and one over there, and then we'll go to the next session.
I'm Scott from Wide Bay Sports Academy. So the regions do miss out, and we're working with across a number of sports in the Wide Bay region in regards to developing between the club and that higher performance. And I suppose my question is, if with this blueprint, is there going to be more support around from the state sporting organisations and Sport and Rec, DTIS, to organisations that are existing, that are on the ground, keeping the kids in their own bed with their families, supporting them? Is that part of that blueprint process? Because there is a couple of organisations doing this already.
Look, I think it's definitely in the mix of the things. I think that what you were just talking about, that translation and collaboration piece, from a club to a regional area, Nat's journey all the way through to nationals. We're not saying that piece isn't important, but I guess we're really focused on making sure that there's not a huge fallout piece in relation to that, and how do people get supported, and And to your point, where it's more appropriate for them to be at home, how can they stay at home and be trained effectively? And those are the kinds of solutions we'll be looking for.
Last question.
Yeah, hi, thanks so much. That was a really great piece of research that you've done and presented. I guess my question is on the use of technology in the future, because, a lot of these problems, to me, you could trial some technological solutions like remote coaching, like AR, VR training, like, onboarding apps, for instance, for clubs, which, came up in some of our research. Is there a focus on some of those technology-aided solutions going forward, or I guess how much of a focus is there on those things?
I think then there should be a lot of focus on that. I mean, we're sort of a tiny bit ahead of the game with that. The last 2 years, the department's funded something called Active Kit, which is about knowledge, information and technology. So we're really trying to drive that digital revolution in how sport is produced, and also how do we work with the sport tech industry to have other people who are good problem solvers help us solve our problems, rather than being quite insular, which is a traditional delivery mode.